If there is one game out there that could be the biggest surprise in 2026 for fighting game fans, bringing completely new audiences into the genre, is Avatar Legends, the fighting game. And we have to talk about it because when this game comes out, it could be absolutely huge, even bigger than what the developers themselves can imagine about their project. And I think that this game is a perfect mix of all the new and is trying to perfect the formula of a specific subgenre of fighting games that has been there for many years but has not been able to reach a mass audience. And maybe the Avatar IP is the perfect answer to that problem. So let's get into it. And to start this discussion, of course, we have to talk about everything that the developers of this project and game are doing incredibly well. And the first point has to be the presentation. I know that some people online have been saying that this game looks like a Flash game or it looks quote-unquote cheap, and I gotta say to you, if you have that take, it is something incredibly disrespectful to the developers of this project and their work, because this is arguably one of the most faithful fighting games out there over the last decade to the external IP in which it is based on. The only comparison that I can even think of is a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ that was made by Arxis, and DBFZ is one of the best, to not just say the best external IP fighting game of all time when it comes to presentation, and the Avatar fighting game is right at that level. This game looks exactly like the actual show, and that is something that is gonna make this game sell really well with the fans of course, that IP. And that is the first entry-level point that you need to have financial success with a fighting game. But the thing is, it's not only about the visuals when it comes to good news around this project, which is really important, it's also that the devs are making a really good job when it comes to gameplay design. This game has a relatively low skill floor with, for example, auto combos, a simple control scheme, also system mechanics that are relatively easy to manage in comparison to maybe other modern fighting games, and at the same time, it has a really high skill ceiling because the game has super insane movement with a ton of options to just move literally on neutral and on the screen while playing. It also has a ton of depth and tech to learn your characters and the systems of the game, and it has motion inputs, even though they are relatively simple motion inputs because if I'm not mistaken it's only 2-2 and quarter circle forwards and back. It is still the presence of a legacy skill that many veterans of the genre want to see in fighting games, and some developers have kind of like taken a back step when it comes to adding it into their games. So it is the perfect mix of old and new. It's the perfect combination of making everyone happy, both the new audiences that want to get into the genre and the people that have been playing these games for many years. And I gotta say that I can't help but connect this project and the work of these developers and the Avatar fighting game with Dragon Ball FighterZ. I feel like it is the exact same combination and features that grab both big audiences and pull them together. The newer people that want to get into fighting games but are really scared of them for many different reasons, and also the veterans that love their games with a lot of depth, a lot of options to play and learn, but also have fun. And I think that both projects are more similar than we think.
That's old. Wait, what the fuck? Wait, you did not go to sleep last night. What the fuck was that?
But now we have to move into a different discussion that is key about this game that I haven't seen many people touch on when it comes to the Avatar fighting game. And that is this argument that the Avatar fighting game is going to be big or is making a big contribution into the fighting game genre because we are getting a new 1v1 fast-paced fighting game, something that we don't really have at the moment, according to some people. And this is where I have to disagree, and also why I think that the Avatar fighting game is going to be big, because it's not something new. It's the process of perfecting a formula that has been present in the genre for many years, but that has not been able to be a huge success, because there is one company with a couple of IPs that has been making incredibly fast-paced 1v1 games for many years, but they have not been able to reach a mass audience, and that is French Bread with Melty Blood and Undernight. And we have to talk about those IPs because to me, the Avatar fighting game seems so similar and very inspired by IPs like Melty Blood and UNI when it comes to the gameplay core and the huge movement freedom of the game. And in any case that you didn't know about them, French Bread is a relatively small Japanese studio that has been making fighting games for well over 20 years. They started with Melty Blood, which is actually based on a Japanese external IP, and it is something much more niche than Avatar, of course. And then later they released their own original IP with Undernight in birth. And these two games are arguably the fastest paced and more like movement based fighting games that we have gotten over the last 4 or 5 years, because Melty Blood Type Lumina, the latest entry in the Melty Blood IP, came out in 2021, and Undernight 2, I think that it came out on 2024. So these games are not that old, and they're actually, I would argue, the biggest representation of the fast-paced 1v1 fighting game. But the thing with these IPs is that they are very niche. They are some of the smallest, fighting games out there that are not indie games, and even though they have a very dedicated and loved community, they don't really have the biggest mass audience for their fighting games. But even with all of that in mind, these games can be incredibly fun when it comes to their gameplay. They have some of the most interesting and unique system mechanics out there of any modern fighting game. They have really good defensive options, incredible movement, and they are super fast paced. And there's a lot of reasons as to why people maybe are not into them. It could be the character designs, the visuals, whatever, right? This is not about blaming people or making anybody feel guilty about not playing these games. It's about giving French bread credit, because to me the Avatar fighting game is not bringing something new into the fighting game space, it's perfecting the formula that UNI and Melty Blood have been doing for many years. And to me, this is actually one of the biggest reasons as to why the Avatar fighting game could end up being absolutely huge, because it's mixing two key ingredients: a big external IP that can bring a potential mass audience into fighting games, right, like what happened with Dragon Ball FighterZ, with a very validated and super polished and detailed gameplay design that is inspired, at least in my opinion, in one of the best fast-paced 1v1 fighting games out there, with games like Melty Blood and like Undernight in Birth. And this is a perfect combination, just like what I said earlier about the low skill floor and the high skill ceiling, because the mix of the IP and this very polished formula of gameplay is gonna bring probably a potential big audience into the game, much more than something super simple and very straightforward that doesn't have a lot of depth but is in some way faithful to the show, which this game obviously is, and is trying to give even more depth to the gameplay of the project through the identity of the show. So I think that the developers of the Avatar project are being really clever with this, because they are putting their new things into the table, but with something that is clearly validated already. It's not necessarily something cutting edge, but is bringing more spice into something that has been already cooked for a lot of years by other developers, but it doesn't have the biggest visibility. And to just finish this discussion, I think that there is one key point that is incredibly relevant to the success of this game when it comes out, and that is the price of the product. I think that many people want to try this game out, they want to play it, but they are not gonna pay a full AAA price for the game, because the game is going to have a small roster, right? Even though the characters are really unique, it's still going to be a relatively small roster of characters. And then also the visuals are something that maybe doesn't convince everybody, even though, like I said earlier, I think that it is an incredible job. What they did with the visuals is actually top tier in my opinion, but that is not necessarily everyone's opinion, and you still want people that are not convinced about your game to try it out and put their money, in the table to play it. So I think that the price that this game has when it comes to their launch, and actually, what it brings to the table, like what DLC does it have in the base price, and the extra like season 1 pricing and all of that, is going to be really relevant. So I do hope that this game doesn't cost 70 or 60 bucks. Hopefully it is something more like 45, 40. It would be the ideal, and I think that if it has that price, it's actually going to be one of the biggest success in the whole year of 2026 for the fighting game genre. I think that it could be absolutely huge. So thank you for watching the video, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Avatar fighting game. Of course, I want to know what you think is going to happen when it comes out, if it's actually going to be a big success, and if you can like and subscribe to support the channel, it means a ton. Thank you for your support, and see you on the next one. Have an incredible 2026.